All right, we want to talk about the book of Joshua, and there's a great story here. It begins, of course, with Joshua taking over from Moses. Moses is gone. Now it is all in the hands of a man named Joshua. They're going to send out 2 spies into the city of Jericho, which is going to be their first objective after crossing the Jordan River. Those spies are going to be discovered. They're going to hide out in the house of Rahab the harlot. She will hide them in flax that is stacked upon her roof. She will then let them down by a red or scarlet rope. Because her house is on the wall, she will let them down outside of the wall. And Rahab has a very important decision to make at this point. Whose side is she going to be on? Is she going to be on the side of Jericho? Is she going to be on the side of the people of Israel? I can imagine that she had perhaps heard about the Israelites. Something down inside of her heart says, I wish I could be part of the people that had that God. And when the 2 spies came, they promised her that when the rest of the city was destroyed, that they would save anyone that was in her house. And later on, when the city is taken, she will be saved. Anyway, she has let them down. She saves her family. Later on, Rahab will marry into the Israelites and will become part of the lineage of Jesus Christ. Meanwhile, the children of Israel are on the eastern side of the Jordan River. They need to cross. Now, the Jordan is not that large of a river. It has many places it can be forded. But at this precise point, it is overflowing its banks during the springtime until the time of harvest. Well, this time, Israel will march on in to the water with the Ark of the Covenant. At the Red Sea, Moses raised his rod. Here, God intends for them to march on in. And so the Ark of the Covenant marched on in, and when it did, the water was dammed up by an invisible hand, and the rest then flowed off downstream. And Israel crosses the Jordan River. In the center of the river, they will take 12 stones, 1 for each tribe, and they will set up a monument. On the far side of the Jordan River, where they came out and spent the first night, they will place 12 stones, each taken from the center of the river, where the Ark of the Covenant stood, and they will make a monument there. And it says that when your children ask, what meaneth these stones? They can tell the story of this is where we crossed over. Well, let me just simply bring it down to us. Do we have any monuments in our life where God did something? Are they stuck in your memory? Can you go to the place and say, it was right there where God did something for me? Well, that's what they did. Those in the middle of the river would never be seen. But there is both an inward witness and an outer witness that we have crossed the Jordan and gone into the land of Canaan, or into the experience of holiness. Something we know down inside of our heart, but there is also a witness that others know. These stones down in the middle of the river could have never been seen. But if there ever was a drought, and if the waters of the Jordan River just simply begin to drop down, then at that time, you might begin seeing a little ripple there in the middle of the river. And then if the famine or the drought continued, the most difficult time for an agricultural group of people, you would see the promise of God. There are the stones where we crossed over. And you know, sometimes in the very depths of despair in our lives, we may have nothing around us to hang on to, but down inside there is a witness to what God has done that in the middle of the dark times we can hang on to. This is a type of holiness in the New Testament. Their first objective now is the city of Jericho. to take the city of Jericho, all the men march around it once a day for 6 days. Then the 7th day, they're going to march around it 7 times, a grand total of 13 times in all. They are to keep their mouths shut and to be quiet while they march around. And then at a given signal, they're supposed to shout. And I might just point out here that there's an awful lot of victories that could be gained if we can keep our mouths shut when we're supposed to keep them shut. And if we can shout when we're supposed to shout. And when they did, the walls of Jericho fell down flat. And Israel from all sides immediately charged into the city, destroyed the city, and everyone was killed, with the exception of Rahab and those that were in her house. They were spared. The city was cursed in its rebuilding, and it will not be rebuilt again for hundreds of years. And it will be the days of Ahab, the king of Israel, the evil king of Israel, that it will finally be rebuilt. In taking the city of Jericho, they were not allowed to take any spoil at all. It was to simply be left there and destroyed or given to God. However, a man named Achan, he took a Babylonian garment. Now remember, they had not had any new clothes for 40 years. So, a new garment would be very, very appealing. He also saw some gold and some silver in the city, and he is going to take those things. He will hide those in the middle of his tent. Israel then marches on to the next town, the town of Ai, and it was just a small city, and they said that everybody did not need to go up there. And so a small army was sent, but at Ai, they were defeated. 36 men were killed at Ai. Joshua will fall on his face before God, saying, Lord, what is wrong? What's going on? And God says, there's sin in the camp. Joshua is instructed to cast lots. They cast lots. The lot will eventually come down and fall upon Achan. They demand to know what he did. He confessed his sin, and he will be stoned and burned, and all of his livestock will be stoned and burned. All of his family will be stoned and burned, and everything of his will be destroyed. Then Joshua and his men will go back to Ai. They will make a surprise attack. They pretend like they're fleeing at the first, and they have an ambush and seize the city behind the men, and they win a great victory over the city of Ai. The next story in the conquest of the land of Canaan is the story of the Gibeonites. Gibeon is a major city not far from Jerusalem. And the men of this city, they've seen what Israel has done. They've seen their victories across the Jordan River against the Moabites and the Ammonites and the Bashanites. And they've watched Jericho fall. They've seen the destruction of Ai. And so they take old clothes and moldy food and worn out shoes, and they march to, some of the leaders and men march to where Joshua is. And they say, we'd like to make an alliance with you. And Joshua asked them about where they live, and they said they come from a far country. And these clothes were new, and the bread was fresh when they left. And so Joshua makes an alliance. And then they go on up to take the next city, and lo and behold, it is Gibeon, and they were tricked. Joshua then made them slaves rather than killing them, and that was acceptable with them. But Gibeon was part of an alliance of a number of cities led by Jerusalem. And when Gibeon made peace with Israel, the alliance, the southern group of cities, we can call it the Southern Confederacy, They decided they needed to do something about Gibeon, so they gathered together to attack Gibeon. Gibeon calls Joshua for help. Joshua and his men are winning a great victory when the sun is going down. And Joshua will ask the sun to stand still while they defeat the Gibeonites. In that battle, stones and hailstones will fall from heaven, and the sun is going to stand still for about a day, and Joshua and his men will win a great victory. Following that victory, they will then march north. In the north, the city of Hazor, or Hazor, has an alliance. We can call it the Northern Union. And there's not a lot of details given about that, but Israel will crush the alliance under Hazor. And with that, that will end the organized opposition in the land of Israel. Each tribe will then be given their possession, and orders are given for them to finish up the conquest by taking the land that is in their area. 2.5 tribes are given land east of the Jordan River. That would be the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, half of Manasseh. The Levites are given 48 cities scattered throughout the country. They're the priests, and each tribe needs a number of priests, and so they're given villages in the possession of every one of the other tribes. 6 cities of refuge are set up where a murderer can run to get a fair trial. And the tabernacle is set up in the city of Shiloh, which is pretty close to being central in the country. Caleb comes to Joshua. Caleb was the man that 45 years now earlier, he and Joshua had challenged the people of Israel at Kadesh Barnea to go on into the land. He said, God, we're well able to possess it. Caleb says that he's now 85, but his strength is still there completely. And Caleb will ask for his possession to be the city of Hebron, which is the city of the giants. And he will go down to take that city where the giants called the sons of Anak live. In the taking of one of the cities, he challenges whoever goes in first will get Aksa, his daughter, as their wife. And his brother Othniel will take the city and get Aksa as his wife, and they will be given some fields and springs of water. Well, that finishes up the book of Joshua, but let me mention one more thing about the book of Joshua. As Joshua is reached the end of his life, he challenges the older group of people and all of the people. He said, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Joshua did, so did all the elders that outlived Joshua.